I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, the world spinning on its axis. In front of me stood Marcus, my so-called friend, smugly leaning against the dresser. His shirt was unbuttoned, his beer in one hand. And there was Jessica, my wife, wrapped in a silk robe, standing too close to him, her laughter sharp and dissonant. It wasn't just the scene but the audacity of it all that made my blood boil. "You're late, babe," Jessica said, her voice syrupy but laced with irritation, as though I was the intruder in my own home. Marcus took a swig of beer, his smirk widening. "We were just catching up." "Catching up?" That bastard sat on my bed, in my room, with my beer. The audacity of his presence filled the room like a noxious cloud. I wasn't sure what came over me, but before I could think twice, I grabbed him by the throat. "Listen to me, you useless piece of shit," I growled, pulling him close enough that I could smell the hops on his breath. "You came into my house, casually drank my beer, and claimed you're going to," my voice cracked with rage. "Do you think you're immortal?" His face turned purple as he wheezed and clawed at my hand, gasping for air. Jessica screamed, her voice piercing the room like shattered glass. "Honey, let him go. This isn't cheating, I'm being honest with you." That line stopped me cold. My grip loosened, and Marcus collapsed to the floor, coughing and gasping like the pathetic worm he was. "What the hell did you just say?" I demanded, turning to her. My chest heaved, and my fists clenched, desperate to find a tether in the chaos. Jessica tossed her hair back like she was auditioning for some bad soap opera. I said, "This isn't cheating. I've told you about Marcus. I've been honest." "Honest?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "So you're telling me you brought this clown into our home too?" My voice broke again. I couldn't even finish the sentence. Marcus had the audacity to chuckle. "Man, take it easy. It's not what you think." I turned on him, my boot connecting with his gut, sending him sprawling backward. He groaned, clutching his stomach like the coward he was. Jessica shrieked again. "Stop it. This is your problem, you always go too far." I pointed a shaking finger at her, my anger bubbling over into something I could barely control. "Jessica, if you walk out with him right now, you're never coming back here again." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, doubt, maybe even fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced with that cold, unapologetic smirk. She crossed her arms and stared me down. "Maybe I won't come back," she spat. The words hung in the air like a death knell. Marcus, still groaning on the floor, tried to pull himself together, but I wasn't done with him yet. I hauled him up by his collar, my fist colliding with his cheekbone. I heard the satisfying crack of bone as he whimpered like the dog he was. "That's it, bastard," I hissed, dropping him like the trash he was. "From now on, your life will be nothing but misery." Jessica stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You're such a control freak. This is why I needed someone like Marcus. He listens. He understands me." I laughed bitterly. "Understands you? Or lets you get away with your lies? You're pathetic, Jessica." The tension in the room was unbearable. My mind raced as the weight of her betrayal finally crashed down on me. This wasn't just a moment of weakness on her part. This was calculated, cold, and utterly heartless. When Marcus finally scrambled to his feet, Jessica grabbed her purse. "We're leaving," she declared, her voice firm. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "Leave. But don't expect me to pick up the pieces when you realize what you've thrown away." And with that, they walked out the door together, leaving me standing in the ruins of my once perfect life. The door slammed shut behind Jessica and Marcus, leaving me in the suffocating silence of my home, or what used to feel like my home. My chest heaved with adrenaline, anger burning hot in my veins, but as the seconds ticked by, the heat gave way to something colder. Emptier. I stumbled back into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The quiet was too loud, every creak and groan of the house mocking me. This place, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stranger's space. I stared at the half-empty beer bottles littering the coffee table, Marcus's fingerprints on everything. The rage came rushing back, but I pushed it down. I needed clarity, not chaos. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through our text conversations. Jessica's recent messages to me had been clipped, perfunctory. Stuck at work. Don't wait up. Meeting an old friend for coffee. Lies. All of them. I thought back to the signs I'd ignored. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden obsession with looking perfect. Jessica wasn't exactly subtle, but I'd let myself believe her excuses because the alternative was too painful to confront. Now, the truth had shoved itself into my face with the force of a wrecking ball. I opened her laptop, which she had left on the kitchen counter. My hands shook as I typed in the password, our anniversary date, of all things. The irony stung. Emails. Dozens of them. All from Marcus. The subject lines alone made my stomach churn. Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. Are you sure he doesn't suspect? The words blurred as I clicked through them, the details carving deep wounds into my already shattered heart. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd planned this, nurtured it, and let it grow while I lived blissfully ignorant. But the kicker was the calendar entry from 2 days ago, Marcus coming over, wine and candles. She had scheduled her betrayal like a dentist appointment. My grip tightened on the edge of the counter. The laptop screen flickered as I slammed it shut, unable to read another word. Hours passed, but I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked relentlessly, each minute dragging me further into the abyss. I replayed the confrontation in my mind, dissecting every word, every look. Jessica's smugness haunted me. Her audacity to stand there and claim this wasn't cheating because she'd been honest made me sick. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. It was from Jessica. I'm staying at Marcus's tonight. Don't wait up. My vision blurred with fury. She had the nerve to text me as though this was normal? As though she hadn't just torn our marriage apart? I wanted to reply, wanted to unleash everything boiling inside me. But instead, I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. She wasn't worth the energy. Not tonight. The next morning, I woke to a house that felt colder than ever. My head throbbed from lack of sleep, but I forced myself into action. I called off work. There was no way I could sit through meetings and pretend everything was fine. Instead, I made a pot of coffee and sat down to think. The decision loomed like a storm cloud. Divorce? Fight for the marriage? Could I even salvage something so broken? Before I could get far, the sound of a key turning in the front door broke my train of thought. Jessica walked in, sunglasses perched on her head and a Starbucks cup in hand, as though nothing had happened. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. She shrugged. "I live here, don't I?" "Do you?" I stood, my hands trembling with suppressed rage. "Because it sure didn't feel like it last night." She sighed, exasperated, as though I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, I needed space. Marcus and I just talked." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't insult my intelligence any more than you already have." Her eyes narrowed. "You're so dramatic. It's not like I was hiding anything." My laugh was bitter. "No? Then explain the emails. Explain why you've been sneaking around behind my back for months. And don't you dare tell me this isn't cheating, Jessica." Her face hardened, the mask of indifference slipping. "I told you, I've been honest. I needed something more, okay? You've been so boring." The words hit me like a slap. "Boring?" I repeated, disbelief thick in my voice. That's your excuse for destroying everything we built? You destroyed it, she shot back, stepping closer, her tone venomous. With your controlling attitude. Your constant need to have things your way. Marcus listens. He gets me. Marcus is a parasite, I spat. And you let him feed off this marriage until there was nothing left. She rolled her eyes, her dismissiveness infuriating. Oh, spare me the dramatics. If you really loved me, you'd try to understand. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. I stepped back, my voice eerily calm. You're right, Jessica. I don't understand. And I don't think I ever will. She smirked, as though she'd won. I knew you couldn't handle it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I could do was watch as the woman I once loved stood before me, a stranger in every sense of the word. Jessica didn't stay long. She sauntered out after our exchange, muttering something about needing to meet Marcus. The door slammed behind her, leaving me in a silence that felt heavier this time. This wasn't just betrayal, it was pure contempt. She didn't care about the damage she'd done. She didn't care about me. For the first time since this nightmare began, my emotions weren't a chaotic jumble. They sharpened into a singular, chilling focus. This wasn't going to end with me playing the broken-hearted fool. I poured another cup of coffee, pulled out my laptop, and started researching. By noon, I had a plan. First, I called my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Erica who had handled a friend's messy divorce. Erica listened intently as I recounted everything. Her voice was steady but firm. Nick, she said, I won't sugarcoat this. The courts might not care about infidelity unless you can prove marital assets were used to fund her extracurricular activities. Do you have evidence of that? I'll get it, I said, gritting my teeth. Good. Keep everything documented. Texts, emails, receipts, anything that ties her betrayal to your finances. We'll build a case. The call left me feeling strangely empowered. For the first time in days, I wasn't reacting to Jessica's chaos, I was taking control. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited my best friend, Brian, over. We'd drifted apart over the years, thanks in part to Jessica's subtle manipulations. She'd always found ways to make me feel guilty for spending time with him. When Brian arrived, he took one look at me and shook his head. Man, you look like hell. I laughed bitterly. You have no idea. As we sat on the couch, I told him everything. His face darkened with every detail. She's a piece of work, he said when I finished. And this Marcus guy? He's lucky you didn't break more than his face. I wanted to, I admitted, my jaw tightening. Brian leaned back, crossing his arms. You know, I never liked her. She always had this smugness about her, like she thought she was better than everyone. Hearing that stung, but I couldn't deny it. Jessica's charm had always had an edge to it, an undercurrent of superiority that I'd once found intoxicating. Now, it felt like poison. What's your plan? Brian asked. Divorce, I said without hesitation. But I'm not letting her walk away from this unscathed. Brian smirked. That's the Nick I know. Let me know how I can help. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I combed through bank statements, tracking every unexplained withdrawal and credit card charge. Dinners at fancy restaurants I'd never been to, hotel stays during weekends when she'd claimed to be visiting her sister. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but it also fueled my determination. Jessica hadn't just cheated on me, she'd stolen from me, using the life we built together to fund her little escapades. And then there was Marcus. Brian, ever the resourceful friend, did some digging and found out more about him. Turns out, Marcus had a history. 2 other men had gone through similar situations with him. He'd wormed his way into their lives, stolen their wives, and left destruction in his wake. I wasn't going to be his next victim. Jessica finally returned one evening, strutting in as though she owned the place. She barely acknowledged me as she dropped her purse on the counter and headed for the bedroom. "Jessica," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. She paused, turning to face me with that same smug expression. "What?" "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically, as though I was an inconvenience. "About what, Nick?" "I'm tired." "Tired from screwing Marcus?" The words were out before I could stop them. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, grow up." I stepped closer, my hands clenched at my sides. "I have. I've grown up a lot in the past week. And I've realized something: you don't respect me. You don't respect this marriage. Hell, you don't respect yourself." Her face twisted in anger. "Don't you dare." "No, you don't dare," I snapped, my voice rising. "You think you can walk all over me, lie to me, humiliate me? You've underestimated me, Jessica. And you're going to regret it." Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Cry some more?" I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "No, Jessica. I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve." Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, separate rooms now, I made another call to Erica. "I have enough," I told her, detailing everything I'd found. "Good," she said. "I'll start drafting the paperwork." "But, Nick, are you sure you want to go through with this? Divorce can get ugly." "Not as ugly as staying in this marriage," I said firmly. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't just weathering it, I was steering my ship through it. Jessica might have shattered our life together, but she hadn't broken me. And as I stared out the window at the darkened sky, I vowed to myself that she never would. The days following Jessica's return were a masterclass in Cold War diplomacy. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words dripped with disdain. It wasn't anger that she'd been caught, it was annoyance that her game had been disrupted. But I wasn't playing the same game anymore. I had stopped begging for explanations, stopped pleading for her to see reason. Now, my focus was on the endgame, and every move I made was deliberate. One morning, as I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table, Jessica breezed in, her perfume overpowering and her phone glued to her hand. She didn't look at me. "Out with Marcus today?" I asked casually, not looking up from my laptop. Her fingers froze over the screen for a fraction of a second before she continued scrolling. "Not that it's any of your business, but yes," she said, her tone sharp. "Oh, it's my business," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Everything that goes on in this house is my business. For now." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, a slow, calculated grin. "You'll find out soon enough." She glared at me, then turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. That afternoon, I met with Erica in person. I handed over a folder containing everything I'd gathered, emails, receipts, texts, even photos of Jessica and Marcus together that Brian had helped me obtain. "This is airtight," Erica said, flipping through the documents. "She won't have a leg to stand on in court." "That's the idea," I said. Erica closed the folder and looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "Nick, I've seen a lot of cases like this. And I've seen what they do to people. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" I nodded. "I've been living in denial for too long. It's time to take my life back." That evening, Jessica returned home in a mood. She stormed into the living room, tossing her purse onto the couch. "What did you mean this morning?" she demanded, her voice high and sharp. I looked up from the book I was pretending to read. About what? About, for now. Are you threatening me, Nick? I closed the book and set it aside, standing slowly. No, Jessica. I don't need to threaten you. But I do need to let you know that things are about to change. Her eyes flashed with defiance. Oh, please. What are you going to do? Kick me out? This is my house, too. Not for long, I said calmly. I've spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers will be ready by the end of the week. For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across her face. She quickly masked it with a sneer. Oh, so now you're Mr. Tough Guy. You think I care? Go ahead. File your stupid papers. I already have, I said. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She wasn't expecting that. And just so you know, I continued, my voice steady, I have all the evidence I need to prove what you've been doing. You and Marcus. Every dinner, every hotel stay, every lie you told, it's all documented. Her face turned pale, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then her expression hardened, and she laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. You think you're so smart, she said, stepping closer. But you're pathetic, Nick. You couldn't keep me happy, and now you're trying to play the victim. Do you know how sad that is? Not as sad as throwing away your marriage for someone like Marcus, I shot back. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret this, she hissed. I already regret marrying you, I said. The next few days were a blur of logistical chaos. Jessica, true to her nature, didn't make anything easy. She stormed around the house, slamming doors and muttering under her breath. At one point, she even threatened to take me for everything I had. But Erica was one step ahead. By the time Jessica received the divorce papers, every financial safeguard was in place. She couldn't touch my savings or assets, and I had ample proof of her infidelity to ensure she wouldn't walk away with more than she deserved, which, in my mind, was nothing. One evening, as I was packing up some of her things to move them into the spare room, she confronted me again. You really think this is going to make you happy? She spat. No, I admitted. But it's going to give me peace. And that's worth more than anything you've ever given me. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize. But then she turned and walked away, slamming the door behind her. The final confrontation came a week later. Jessica had been dragging her feet about moving out, claiming she needed more time to figure things out. I wasn't buying it. That evening, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I walked into the living room with her packed bags. What's this? She asked, her tone icy. It's time, I said simply. You need to go. She stood, her eyes blazing. You don't get to decide that. I do, I said. This is my house, and you've overstayed your welcome. I've given you more chances than you deserved. Now it's over. She glared at me, her chest heaving with anger. You'll regret this, Nick, she said through gritted teeth. Maybe, I said, opening the door. But not as much as I'd regret letting you stay. And with that, I watched her walk out of my life, dragging her suitcases behind her. For the first time in weeks, the house felt quiet. Peaceful. And I knew I'd made the right decision. The first night without Jessica in the house was eerily quiet. For years, I had grown used to the sounds of her laughter, her footsteps, her voice. Even her constant criticisms had been a kind of presence. Now, the silence felt like both a relief and a void. I wandered through the rooms, taking stock of what was left. Jessica hadn't taken much when she left, just her clothes, a few personal items, and a picture of us from the early days of our relationship. That picture stung. It was from a time when we were happy, or at least, I thought we were. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window, staring out at the street. The glow of the streetlights painted soft shadows across the room. My mind wandered back to the last few years, analyzing every fight, every cold shoulder, every lie I'd ignored. When had we gone so wrong? The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. If Jessica's betrayal had taught me anything, it was that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what once was. It was time to reclaim my life. Step 1 was fixing the house. Jessica's touch was everywhere: throw pillows, tacky art pieces she'd insisted on, even the smell of her favorite lavender candles. I started by boxing up everything that reminded me of her. Her mugs, her books, the ridiculous golden mirror she'd bought during a self-love phase, all of it went into storage. By midday, the house was a blank slate, stripped of her influence. It felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Brian dropped by later that afternoon, carrying a 6-pack of beer and a pizza. "How's it going, man?" he asked, taking in the changes. "Better," I admitted. "Clearing out her stuff helps." He grinned. "I told you, Jessica never had good taste anyway." We spent the evening eating pizza, drinking beer, and watching old action movies. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. A few days later, I got a call from Erica. "Nick," she said, her tone brisk. "Jessica's lawyer reached out. She's willing to settle, but she has some demands." "Demands?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "She wants half of the house and spousal support," Erica said, a note of irritation in her voice. "Spousal support?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "She cheated on me." "Unfortunately, the courts don't always care about that," Erica said. "But don't worry, I've got enough to counter her demands. If she doesn't back down, we'll go to court, and trust me, she won't come out ahead." For a moment, I considered caving just to avoid the hassle. But then I thought of Jessica's smug smile, her blatant disrespect, her audacity to walk out with Marcus as if she'd done nothing wrong. "No," I said firmly. "We fight this." "Good," Erica said. "I'll handle it." The weeks turned into months, and life slowly started to normalize. I threw myself into work, took up running again, and even started painting, a hobby I'd abandoned when Jessica mocked my amateur attempts. Every day, I felt a little lighter, a little more like myself. But Jessica wasn't done with her games. One evening, I came home to find her car parked in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch, looking as if she hadn't a care in the world. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my tone cold. She stood, brushing invisible dust off her designer jeans. "I wanted to talk." "We have nothing to talk about," I said, stepping past her to unlock the door. "Nick, wait," she said, her voice softening. I turned to face her, crossing my arms. "What?" She hesitated, her confident facade faltering. "I've been thinking about us. About what we had. I miss it." The audacity of her words nearly made me laugh. "You miss it? Is Marcus not giving you everything you need?" Her face darkened. "This isn't about him." "No," I said, stepping closer, my voice low. "It's about you. It's always been about you, Jessica. Your needs, your desires, your selfishness. I'm done playing your games." She flinched but recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "You're going to regret pushing me away, Nick." "Maybe," I said, opening the door. "But at least I'll have my dignity." Jessica's visit stirred up old emotions, but it also solidified my resolve. I wasn't going back to that toxic cycle. The divorce finalized a month later. Erica called me with the good news. "She folded," Erica said. "You keep the house. No spousal support. Just a clean break." Relief washed over me. It was finally over. The first thing I did after the divorce was finalize was repaint the living room. Gone were the pale lavender walls Jessica had insisted on. I chose a deep, calming blue, a color that felt like a fresh start. As I rolled the paint onto the walls, I realized something. I wasn't just reclaiming my house, I was reclaiming myself. Jessica had taken a lot from me, my trust, my peace, my belief in love. But she hadn't destroyed me. I finished the last stroke of paint, stepped back, and smiled. This was my life now. And I was ready to live it. Life had been quiet for a while, almost too quiet. I'd fallen into a routine of work, gym, and the occasional beer with Brian. The house was mine now, in every sense of the word, and the newfound peace was something I treasured. But life has a funny way of pulling the rug out from under you. One Thursday evening, I was in the garage, fiddling with an old guitar I'd been meaning to restring for months. The faint hum of a distant car engine broke through the quiet. Moments later, tires screeched to a halt in my driveway. Curious, I stepped outside and froze. Jessica. But she wasn't alone. A small boy, no older than 3, clung to her leg. His face was flushed, and tears streamed down his cheeks as he sniffled quietly. "Jessica, what the hell are you doing here?" I asked, my tone sharp. She looked frazzled, her hair in disarray and her face pale. For once, she didn't seem smug or composed. "Nick," she began, her voice trembling. "I need your help." I crossed my arms, glaring at her. "You're joking, right? After everything you put me through, you think you can just show up here and—" "It's Marcus," she interrupted, her voice rising. He's gone." Her words hit me like a slap. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" She swallowed hard, her gaze darting to the child. "He left me. Took everything. Money, credit cards, everything. I came home, and he was just gone. And now I have nothing. I can't." I cut her off, anger bubbling to the surface. "So, what? You think I'm some kind of backup plan? You think I'll just swoop in and save you because Marcus turned out to be the scumbag everyone but you saw him as?" "Nick, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I don't have anywhere else to go. And I can't," she gestured toward the boy. "I can't do this alone." That's when it hit me. I stared at the child, his innocent eyes wide and fearful. He had curly brown hair and a small birthmark on his cheek. There was something hauntingly familiar about him. "Jessica," I said slowly, my voice trembling. Who is this?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. "Jessica," I shouted, my heart pounding. "He's yours," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. I stumbled back, my head spinning. What are you talking about?" Jessica stepped closer, her hands trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you. I found out after Marcus and I started seeing each other. I thought it would be easier if I just let him believe the baby was his." "You thought," I choked on the words, anger and disbelief warring within me. "You thought it would be easier to lie to me? To let me go on thinking we were just two broken people instead of a father and mother?" She burst into tears, cradling her face in her hands. "I'm sorry, Nick. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do." For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. Then I looked at the boy, my son, and everything shifted. He was trembling, his little hands clutching at Jessica's leg as if she were his only lifeline. My anger receded, replaced by a fierce, protective instinct I didn't know I had. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, crouching down to his level. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, glancing at Jessica before mumbling, "Liam." "Hi, Liam," I said, forcing a smile despite the chaos swirling inside me. "I'm Nick." He stared at me for a moment, then buried his face in Jessica's leg. That night was a whirlwind. Jessica refused to leave, and against my better judgment, I let her and Liam stay in the guest room. After Liam fell asleep, I confronted her in the living room. "You owe me the truth," I said, my voice low and steady. "No more lies. No more half-truths. Start from the beginning." Jessica nodded, her eyes red and swollen. I didn't know I was pregnant until after things started falling apart between us. By then, Marcus had come into the picture. He made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. When I found out I was pregnant, I told myself it was his. It was easier that way. Easier for who? I snapped. Certainly not for Liam. Or me. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't care. "Nick, I messed up," she said, her voice cracking. "I know that. But Marcus is gone, and I can't do this alone. Liam deserves better than this. He deserves you." Her words cut deep, and for a moment, I hated her more than I ever thought possible. But then I thought of Liam, his wide, scared eyes and his quiet sniffles. This wasn't his fault. "I need time to process this," I said, standing. "But don't mistake my compassion for weakness, Jessica. You don't get to come back into my life and expect things to be the same." "I don't want them to be the same," she said softly. I want Liam to have a chance." I nodded, more for myself than for her. "We'll figure it out. But on my terms." As I walked to my bedroom, I felt the weight of 1,000 emotions bearing down on me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, but also a strange, unfamiliar hope. Because despite everything, I had a son. And no matter what Jessica had done, I wasn't going to let him down. The days after Jessica's revelation were a chaotic swirl of emotions and logistics. Having Liam in the house changed everything. His innocent laughter and curious nature brought life to the place, even as his presence amplified the tension between Jessica and me. I didn't trust her, how could I? But Liam was blameless in all this. He was a bright-eyed, clever little boy who quickly warmed up to me. The first time he called me Daddy, I had to step outside to catch my breath. Jessica, however, was another matter entirely. One evening, after Liam had fallen asleep, Jessica and I sat in the living room. I'd made it clear we were only cohabiting for Liam's sake until I figured out the next steps. "We need to talk about custody," I said, breaking the silence. Jessica looked up from her phone, her expression guarded. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not going to let you waltz in and out of his life whenever it's convenient for you. If Marcus showed me anything, it's that you're not exactly the model of stability." Her eyes flashed with anger. "That's rich, coming from the guy who couldn't make me happy." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Oh, right, Jessica. Because your happiness was my sole responsibility. It's always about you, isn't it? Even now, when we're talking about Liam, you're making it about yourself." Her jaw tightened. "I'm his mother. You can't just cut me out of his life." "I don't want to cut you out," I said, my voice firm. "But I'm not going to let you screw him up the way you screwed up our marriage." Her face fell, and for a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. "Nick. I'm trying. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to be better." I stared at her, searching for any trace of sincerity. Maybe she believed her own words, but after everything, I wasn't ready to take her at face value. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into building a bond with Liam. We spent afternoons at the park, reading books, and building Lego towers that inevitably became spaceships. He was a sponge, soaking up every bit of attention and love I could give him. Jessica, to her credit, seemed to genuinely want to be part of his life. She cooked meals, helped with bedtime stories, and tried to repair the frayed threads of her relationship with me. But trust is a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered beyond repair. One night, after Liam was asleep, Jessica approached me in the kitchen. "Nick," she said hesitantly. I didn't look up from the dishes. "What?" "I've been thinking, maybe it's best if I leave." I turned to face her, surprised. "Leave? What about Liam?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I know I've messed up. I know you'll never forgive me, and maybe you shouldn't. But Liam, he deserves stability. And you're better at giving that to him than I am." For a moment, I was speechless. "Jessica," I said finally, "running away isn't the answer. You're his mother. He needs you, too." She shook her head. "He needs someone who's not going to let him down. And right now, I don't think that's me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret and a hint of truth. In the end, Jessica didn't leave entirely, but we agreed on a plan. She would move out and take time to work on herself while we navigated co-parenting. Liam would primarily live with me, with Jessica visiting regularly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The first night after she moved out, the house felt quiet again, but this time it wasn't the lonely kind of silence. It was peaceful, punctuated by Liam's soft breathing through the baby monitor. Months turned into a year, and life found a new rhythm. Liam thrived, his laughter filling the house and his joy reminding me of what truly mattered. Jessica stayed true to her word, showing up consistently for Liam and slowly rebuilding her relationship with him, and, to a lesser extent, with me. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer easily, but I learned to let go of the anger. It didn't happen all at once, it was a gradual process, born out of necessity and a desire to be the best father I could be. Looking back, I realized that Jessica's betrayal had been a wake-up call. It forced me to confront not only her lies but also the ways I had allowed myself to settle, for less love, less respect, less happiness than I deserved.